Hey everyone, and welcome to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Pierre, and I'm joined, as always, by Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
This is a science fiction movie podcast where every week we get together, we have watched a film, and we talk about it. It's something from the genre of science and fiction,
I believe it's pronounced gender of science fiction. I'm just kidding.
I don't even know how to respond to that joke. So that's what we do every week. And coming up this week, we have a movie that's been kind of on the to-do list for a while. It is called The Endless. It came out in 2017. And we'll start spoiler-free, as we always do. We'll give you a warning in the middle before we go into spoilers, and we'll take it from there. So, yeah, this movie is about two brothers who are actually played by the two directors, the co-directors of the movie. Their real names are actually the names in the movie. Obviously, they've got different last names, but directors Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson are the co-directors, and they play characters named Aaron and Justin. And this is kind of a quasi-sequel to another movie, which... and I say quasi because it's like in the same universe as another movie, and I read up afterwards, after I watched it, because I've not seen the other one, about how it connects to the other one, and it's kind of interesting in a weird little way. So I'll go into that a little bit, but so they used to be in a cult, a UFO death cult, as it's referred to a couple of times, somewhere in nowhere, California. They're in this cult years ago. And the people who are there talk about the ascension and all these different things. But we meet up with these brothers. It's been 10 years since they left. They're in their sort of mid to late 20s, maybe just pushing 30, maybe the older one is. And the younger brother, they're struggling for money. They're really sad. And the younger brother wants to go back to the cult to try and sort of see how it is, see how people are. Because they get this mysterious videotape of one of them as if they're about to go on their ascension, and the older brother's convinced that it's a suicide thing. It's like a Kool-Aid suicide pact, because they're using different words for it and all that. But the younger brother can't rest. They're both in therapy, we see, and they take the drive back to this cult, this camp, and they go, and while they're there, we meet the various characters that are there. We kind of get a sense of what they're about, and kind of the weirder things that start happening. And because obviously what I'm describing so far doesn't necessarily sound like it's a science fiction movie, but it does go very sci-fi the more it goes. And there are things that are unique to this camp and what the people are there experiencing. And I'll leave it there for spoiler's sake, and we'll get into it over time. But so Tara, did you enjoy The Endless?
It's okay.
Hey, that was more.
I don't think it's bad. It's just, it's not very engaging to me. Like, there are some parts that are really cool, and I know it's a really low budget, and some of the effects for the budget are pretty impressive, and some of the ideas are really good. It might just be a little bit too, I don't know, independent.
What's funny is I was expecting you to be harsher than that, because you'd kind of implied to me before we recorded that you weren't so hot on it. But
I mean, it's not really one that I'll ever watch again, but like, I really do admire people who make movies, and it's just these two guys, and they are not Tommy Wiseau.
Oh, no. Like, I think there's almost like a red flag when you see, it's the directors are playing, like, brothers in the movie.
Yeah, the directors are playing the main guys, and they also produced and wrote, and
I think
the cinematographers, the editors.
Yeah,
those are always red flags. But I think, it's definitely one of the better versions of that I've seen.
No, like, they're very... Because it's actually not the first film I've seen by them. I saw a film that they did a few years ago called Spring. We did it on the Screams After Midnight, me and Tim. And it wasn't a perfect movie. In fact, the biggest complaint we had, bizarrely, for a horror movie podcast, it was that the horror stuff was unnecessary, and it should have just been everything else that was in the movie. And it was this romantic drama about a guy who meets a girl at... Was it in Paris? Oh, well, it wasn't in Paris, but it was in... Was it in France or Italy? It was like a seaside kind of like town in one of those countries, and he falls in love, but she's secretly like a not a demon, but like She's like a creature as well who comes out at night, and it was a good love story. It was like a really nice little like moody love story. But the actual horror
I actually
parts,
think some of the writing in this is pretty good. Like I really like the dialogue in the movie quite a bit.
very natural.
Yeah, and I really do like them playing brothers together. Like there's a lot of just like natural, like you said, dialogue or banter or picking on each other that seems very brotherly. Like it was good. I oddly enough, I think I might have the same complaint though. Like if you took out the supernatural part of it, the sci-fi part of it, it might be a pretty good cult movie.
Yeah, you don't actually need the sci-fi part, which is an interesting thing. I think is.
Although I hate this cult. I hate that they're like hipsters.
Oh sure. Oh absolutely, yeah. Don't get me wrong, I do kind of see what you're saying. I think it fits better in this movie than the horror stuff did in Spring, although I think I like Spring as a movie overall more, bizarrely. Because I think the sci-fi stuff in this, the mythology of it as it kind of builds upon itself as we learn more and more about it throughout the course of it. I'm like, there's actually a lot of interesting ideas here that I actually really like. I think I probably like it a bit more than you do, but I agree it's kind of not like maybe hitting the high mark that it wants to. And I genuinely feel watching this, and between this and Spring, and I should go back and watch the first movie that kind of falls on from. In fact, because we see footage multiple times in this movie of the two characters when they were in the cult like 10 years ago, and it looks like, hey, they actually look younger, and that's because that was footage.
They look very different.
It's because it's footage from the first movie, where it wasn't 10 years ago, it was only 5 years ago before this movie was made, but it was footage of them like years ago when they made the first movie. In fact, one of the clips you see of it on like one of the videotapes wasn't even a scene from the movie. It was like behind the scenes footage, like before they shot a scene. And but yeah, they were in these white shirts. They were playing these characters, and so that's kind of neat. That said, though, I did think some of the dialogue implied that, like, because they keep talking about the younger brother, Aaron's the younger brother. They keep talking about the younger brother Aaron as if he was a kid, and I guess they're trying to like say he was in his maybe late teens when they left. But every time we see him in this footage, I'm like, yeah, he still looks like 20. Like, I don't know if I buy that he was a kid when they were here.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know.
He's younger, sure, but he's still a bit too honky looking to be
But I mean, he's also on there saying things about the cult that they know are untrue. So maybe it's like right at the end when they're about to take off.
Sure.
But I guess they said that he left when he was a kid, so I don't know. Yeah, you're right.
I don't know.
I guess it's off.
It's just one of those things.
They did the best they could.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where they can't really fake it, but
But you're right, they did look younger. I noticed that too.
Yeah. And that was true. And even like I think Hal, the sort of leader style dude of the cult, you see him in the footage as well, and he looks younger.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, so you see a few of them looking younger, and it's because they were all in this movie, and you get the sense because it is such a low budget movie. A lot of these they gave themselves a cameo in that movie, and then they had this insane idea to make a whole movie about these characters after, as if they'd escaped. Because I think in the original movie, which I'll go get the name of because I keep saying the original movie when it's not, because this is not a sequel. It's not. I said it was a quasi sequel.
It's just part of the same world.
Yeah, it was called Resolution. The first movie.
Is Spring also part of it?
No, at least not. I mean, maybe it technically could be, but there's nothing in the movie that I think connects it. In terms of whereas in Resolution you have these characters who have a cameo plus characters that we meet later on are actually the main characters from Resolution. I'll get to that in spoilers because that is deep spoiler stuff. But and to their credit, this pair, these directors, their next movie, which is already playing at film festivals and is coming out properly next year, stars Anthony Mackie. So they're going up in the world.
Hey.
Yeah,
I mean, if I were a producer with a bunch of money, I'd look at these guys and say, hey, they got talent. See what they can do with a budget.
Yeah, the new movie is called Synchronic, and it stars Anthony Mackie and Jamie Dornan. It's about two New Orleans paramedics. Sorry?
Couple big names.
Sure. It's about two New Orleans paramedics' lives that are ripped apart after encountering a series of horrific deaths linked to a designer drug with bizarre otherworldly effects. So,
Ooh.
you know, they're going up in the world, which is cool. Because I think when I watched this movie, I kind of, like what you said about, like, really appreciating people who go out and make movies for next to nothing. Like, I appreciate about that about this movie. I kind of say, oh, like, it's not quite nailing that, like, in, you know, that low budget gem that other films have done. Because I think one of the things that I think people forget about is that stuff like Halloween was like this dirty little cheap movie that just happened to be so good that it broke, you know, through and became this hit. Obviously, the most recent example of that is Paranormal Activity, which was shot for like, what, 50 grand,
Pennies.
if that, like, which I know to normal people that sounds like
coupons.
a decent amount of money, but for a movie that is nothing.
Yeah.
They rented a camera and knew someone with a nice house. It's like, hey, can we use your house for, like, you know, 5 months to shoot this movie? And they're like, yeah, sure. Or maybe what?
And now 5 movies later.
Yeah, and they're doing a new one soon. It was in the news recently. Because that's coming back for number 7, I think we're on. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I was still off.
Yep. And to be fair, I only know how many there is because I reviewed them all. So you know.
You do have a horror podcast.
Yeah, they're nestled in my brain. But no, when I watch this movie, I do feel this kind of respect for the ingenuity of basically doing all these really big sci-fi ideas on next to no money, and just because, I mean, this movie's low budget. The Resolution movie was like $20,000, which is nothing for a movie that is absolutely nothing.
I thought some of the effects were pretty good for the low budget.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, some of it looked like, you know, clearly an effect, you know, fire and stuff. Like, okay, that's not real fire, but it looks pretty decent for the budget that they had.
Honestly, the fire you're talking about is the only time it really bothered me, because all the other stuff it shows are all kind of like unnatural things anyway, so it didn't necessarily need to look realistic. It just had to look, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas fire, obviously, like we instantly can tell if fire looks fake. Same with water. Water and fire, like immediately, like, oh, there's something wrong.
So there is a pretty good water effect that happens. It's like a overhead shot where you're looking down, and you can kind of see something in the water.
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, but that's easy.
Cool.
That's kind of easier to do though than like actually having like water splash around at CG kind of thing, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But you know, because that's just the same as like you could easily just do that in the sky. It'd be the same effect almost. You'd just be recoloring it to make it fit. But no, I agree. Like this, you know, ingenuity. I mean, one day we'll do Monsters, which is Gareth. I always mix up the Gareths because there's Gareth Evans and Gareth Edwards, the one that did Godzilla. He did a movie called Monsters. Edwards, right? Okay, Gareth Edwards. He did a film called Monsters, and it is like a low budget movie made for next to nothing, and it has really good visual effects in it, and he did them all on his laptop. But you watch that movie, you're like, this is actually really good effects. Like, he spent a lot of time on this.
I thought the cinematography was pretty good in this movie too, and it's done by one of the directors. Because I thought it looked really good.
No, it does.
I do think it's really long. Like,
it's a bit.
Some of it's pretty tough to get through.
The pacing.
And there's a lot of new characters that get added halfway through that you're like, do I need all of this? I don't know.
The pacing's a bit lackadaisical, but to go back to your previous point there about cinematography, it looks like a movie. And a lot of movies that are made for cheap don't look like movies. They look like shot on video, like crap. Let's call it what it is. A lot of them, you know, they have that look to them, that filter. They have that whatever. This looks like a movie, and I'm sure it's probably shot digitally. I mean, most stuff is nowadays, but like it's lit properly. It looks like a proper movie, and at no point did I feel like I'm watching someone slumming it. You know, I felt like I was watching people who have learned enough to know how to do a movie, and you know, so I respect this a lot more than I probably like it.
Me too.
But I like it well enough. Like I think there's some good stuff in here. I do almost wish that it got to its ideas a bit quicker, because I felt like the first half of the movie is about really not. It's like everything's so kind of vague and not knowing what's going on, and then we get to the second half of the movie. It's like, here's all these sci-fi things like really in your face, and I felt like there was a bit of a tone shift that didn't quite. You know, I feel like if we actually spent time seeding those sci-fi things in a bit earlier, I think they may have worked better.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. I kind of like I like the parts where, okay, so they're like a Heaven's Gate type of cult,
Hmm.
but maybe like maybe it is real and we don't know. But because we get so much supernatural stuff happening, it's like, okay, well, clearly there's something going on here. And it kind of just takes away the is it or is it not real? Like there's something real here.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. But I liked more the idea of them being unsure. Kind of like that other low budget movie that I watched. They Look Like People, where it was just enough to go, is there something else bigger happening here? Or is it all in their head? It's just or are they crazy? Because
Yeah,
they
I
don't
mean,
come
that,
off as crazy, but everything they say is crazy. Like it's,
yeah,
yeah,
first of all, that's a really good movie. And secondly, that does answer it at the very, very, very end. But it's like it's the final moment. It's the
right.
final scene where you do get an answer. But that's okay at that point because but I get what you're saying here. Is that this movie, The Endless, like the first half goes down, is it real or isn't it? But then it immediately kind of at the halfway point
Hmm.
says, no, that's real. It's all real, and now we're going to do lots of real crazy stuff. And it feels
Yeah.
like it's two different movies. It feels like it wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to have the vague, like ambiguous, is it or isn't it real?
Hmm.
But then it spends a whole second half doing all these crazy sci-fi ideas, and I love all the ideas. I actually think there's a really great kind of
Aha
potential
moment.
in the mythology. No, I
Hmm.
wasn't going to say aha moment. What do you think's the aha moment?
Well, there is a line that comes up later on
Sure.
about like three-fourths of the way through the film where I'm like, oh, that's what this movie's about.
Mm. Sure, sure, sure.
It was
Uh,
my aha moment.
is your aha moment? You can tell us all about your aha moment in a
I'll
little bit.
probably forget.
No, I'll remind you. I'll bring it up. I'll bring up the aha moment.
Yeah.
Take on me, take me on. The band was called
Thank you
Aha.
for reminding us of the band.
Yes, like it's become a bit of a running gag here when something reminds me of a song or a band. I try and do a bit of singing miserably and failing as much as I can.
One of us has to. You're
Yes,
right. I'm
yes.
glad you've taken on the responsibility, and I'm sure the audience is glad.
Hey, when we did that top 100 movie votes results, you were
Oh,
humming
I
the.
did a lot of
Yeah,
singing.
you did a lot of theme tune humming throughout that.
Yep. A
So,
lot of drinking.
yeah, it's a lot of drinking. So, no, I think the two brothers are actually pretty solid. Like, they're not like the best actors in the world, but because they're playing very natural, like sort of probably similar to their own characters
Hmm.
kind of roles, and they come across as natural, it feels like it fits the movie quite well. Even though I don't like watch these two and think like there's a reason why they didn't also cast themselves in big roles in every other movie they've done. And presumably their new movie, maybe they'll have cameos with Anthony Mackie, but they've got Anthony Mackie, like they're going to let him do
Yeah,
the
like
acting.
I'm curious to see what they do with someone like Anthony Mackie, who's clearly a great actor. So it'd be interesting. Like it's like when the primer guys get a budget. Like what can they do? Like clearly they have great ideas, and
Mm.
with other people who are also great at their roles in a production, what can they make with that?
Well,
So,
what's nice to see about these two in terms of like going through their low budget career and kind of like seeing that they have talent, they have ideas, is that
mhm.
they've been pretty consistent with their output. Like the resolution was 2012, and then Spring was 2014. Then this was 2017, and then they've got a new movie which it's listed as 2019, but it's really 2020 by the time everyone gets it. But
Mhm.
it's a very consistent output. It's not like they've been struggling to get their next movie done. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it was easy. I'm not saying that they may have actually been struggling to get their movies funded, but in terms of like the outside perspective of watching how often it's taken for them to get their next movie done, it feels like the progression has been quite a natural pace. And it feels
Hmm.
like, no, their career's got a trajectory. It's going up, and they're getting, like you say, bigger and better things. They've got Anthony Mackie in a movie now, so
Big deal.
big deal. And I have to imagine it's their biggest budgeted movie. So,
Yeah.
no
I
question.
mean, Anthony Mackie alone probably cost more than the production of this movie.
Yeah. What's interesting, Spring, I have to imagine, cost more than this one, though, because Spring had a pretty nice location. Like, they were shooting in
Mhm.
this fancy looking town that
Yeah.
had some really beautiful
And
visuals.
French cuisine is not cheap.
But Whereas this is, it feels low budget because it's all at this camp, or it's in the woods, or it's all these locations that feel like. In fact, one of the things I read when I was looking up stuff afterwards, just to find out about how it connected to the first movie, is that when they were making Resolution, the cast and crew all stayed at the camp that the cult stay at in this movie.
Oh,
that's where they were
that's
staying
funny.
while they were shooting. So, that's pretty.
So is that a sci-fi movie too? Should we do it?
Yes, it is a sci-fi movie. In fact, when we get to spoilers, I'll tell you exactly what it is, what it's about.
Okay.
Because it's actually easy to do if you've seen this movie. So, yeah. Is there anything else we want to say spoiler-free? Do you want to talk about anything else?
No.
No. All right. Well, in that case, we will give you the spoiler warning from henceforth. However, before we move on to the spoilers, I am going to thank our Patreon producers. So I want to thank David Short, Alison M. Fordyce, Cindy Palacios, and Tyler Hess for being our Patreon producers for the month of December.
Thank you.
Yes, and they're that because they are at the $20 or up tier on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, which Tara is going to tell you all about right now.
Yeah, if you are interested in becoming a producer yourself and producing this low budget content, then check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MildFuzzTV. And you don't have to become a producer tier. You can donate as low as $1 and you get bonus episodes of The Ace. So check it out.
Yeah, we did Rotor recently. That was November's episode. There's a whole back catalogue forming of these bonus episodes. So $1 will get you access to all of it. Plus bonus episodes of other stuff and so on and so on. $5 tier gets voting rights. You can vote between 4 movies every month. This month's vote's not went up yet at the time of recording, although it'll probably be up by the time this goes up. But in fact, me and Tara are probably going to sit and talk about what the next vote's going to be right after we're done with this, because we haven't thought about that yet. So
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah. So yes, Patreon. So yes, full spoilers for The Endless. So we meet the brothers at the start. And I like the tone at the start of the movie. It has this kind of like almost Primer-esque tone where it's the two brothers and they're kind of just living their slubby lives, and they get this mysterious tape, and it's not even like a VHS. It's like a weird format for from a camcorder, because I do like the subtle point that he goes to like a flea market and starts like holding the tape against like various devices to see if anything will play it.
Yeah.
Because
some of them are really small though. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah, clearly not going to fit that one, but. He finds one, he brings it home, and him and his brother, it's Aaron doing all this, and him and Justin watch the tape, and it's Anna, who we're going to meet later properly, and she's basically saying, hey, for anyone watching this, like, just know that this is our ascension, and we all did this, willing, and we're all happy, and whatever else she says, and the tape just kind of ends there, and this is kind of obviously the thing that inspires Aaron to want to go back, and he's clearly in love with her as well, which is something that kind of sort of comes up throughout the movie, or at least if he's not yet, as soon as he sees her again, he's like, whoa, okay, this is clearly the woman I had
She's pretty
crush on my entire life. Which, by the way, I recognize this woman, this Callie Hernandez, who plays Anna. I was like, I know her face, and it was bugging me. So obviously, as you do, you go to IMDb and you click on her name and you're like, what has she been in? And she was in 2 things that I have seen. She was in 2 things, right? She was in an episode of Too Old to Die Young, which I have seen. She was in 3 things, sorry, because I actually didn't even notice Too Old to Die Young the last time I looked. She was in the new Blair Witch movie from 2016, right? And then...
Yeah, not ringing any bells for me.
And then, unfortunately, the most notable thing that Have you seen this? I can't remember if you've seen this or if you didn't go to see it.
What is it?
Because you hated the previous one. But the other thing she was in, this gives me nightmares thinking about it, is Alien Covenant.
No, I haven't seen it.
No, okay. Well, she's in that.
Well, good for her, being in big budget stuff.
Yeah, and that was the same year as The Endless, so she was bouncing between, small and big stuff.
Yeah.
So, and she's in some stuff coming up. She's in a movie called Avalanche. Is that a movie about an avalanche? Is that a disaster movie? I hope it is.
does it star Dwayne The Rock Johnson saving pretty girls from avalanches? I don't know.
In a small town in Texas, I don't think you get avalanches in Texas, but I'll continue. An annual endurance contest to win a pickup truck promises thrilling entertainment to spectators and the chance of a lifetime to participants.
Is it like where people put the hands on the car and they have to the last person who like to faint is the one who gets the truck?
It just says it ends in real tragedy. What's the real tragedy?
I don't know. Nobody gets the truck.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. Like, but if it's not snow, it's just a rock slide, right? Like, it has to be snow to be an avalanche.
Yeah.
So
because we also have mudslides and rock slides. So. Yeah.
So, okay, so I have to imagine they use avalanche as a metaphorical title. Anyway, we're not here to talk about avalanche. Avalanche. All right, so there's actually like a little theme here for the first like 10 minutes where we cut to them like being like in therapy, and they're like talking to a therapist. We never see. We just hear them. We just see them talking to someone. We also have them goofing off like brothers. Aaron's cutting Justin's hair, and he gets an idea at one point to be a bit of a prankster. So he just like shaves a big sort of bit in the middle of his head,
like a reverse mohawk.
Yeah, and runs out the room, and then it cuts to Justin's bit sitting in front of the camera for the interview or the therapist, and he's just got this like sort of flat bit in the middle of his hair.
I know. Why wouldn't he just fix it?
Yeah, just pick up the clipper and do the rest. It may be a bit rough because you're doing it yourself, but it'll be better than leaving it like that.
Or wear a hat.
Yeah, wear a hat. Yeah, maybe he was wearing a hat, but he took it off to show the therapist. Look at what this dick done to me. Look at it.
Yeah, I mean, he does say like it was just a joke, and he knows it or whatever, but he's also like upset about things, and I think it's some kind of I don't think it's a therapist. I think it's like a group meeting.
Oh, sure.
I think he says there's a line of dialogue where he says he's going to like ex-cult session or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, they never show you anything though. It's just on them. Every time it comes to one of these scenes at the start of the movie, it's just them and nothing else. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and you know, Aaron wants to go back, and Justin's not really feeling it, but he's going to do it for his brother. But there's a lot of like things here. He doesn't let Aaron drive. He doesn't let Aaron. He's mad at him for spending money on a camcorder so that he could watch the tape. He's constantly.
Right. Well, he kept telling him to buy a new car battery, and instead he spent the money on a tape thing for the cult, which they escaped from. So, like, he's pissed off about that. But yeah, he doesn't let Aaron do anything. Yeah,
which is also one of the main points of the movie, is that the movie's really about their relationship. Is about them and getting over the trauma of their past, because their parents died when they were kids. They kind of visit the site of the accident on the way to the cult, and the cult took them in, and that's why they ended up there. And which begs the question: can they become legal guardians for kids? Like, do they just put in some paperwork and social services won't take them away? Like,
I don't know.
Or they just don't tell anyone, never know. So by the time it was like, they were out like campaigning for the cult, they were already old enough that it didn't really matter anymore.
They were already adults.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any paperwork because they were in a cult.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, who knows?
Yeah, so they go and they get there, and there's a couple of weird times, like Shitty Carl, this angry guy, kind of walks past them, just kind of mouthing off, and it's like, okay, that's like a hint for later.
Disappears into dust.
Yeah. Well, you don't see that the first time, do you? When they first arrive there.
Maybe not. Maybe that's later.
Because that's a bit.
Oh, I think that's when Justin is like going for a jog or something.
Yeah. Because I think that's a bit overt at that point. This point in the movie, that it's like at this point it's still like, oh, nothing's here. Because this is the thing, we should explain that Justin is told Aaron repeatedly that it's not only a death cult, but they're all castrated. Well, the men are all castrated. You can't castrate a woman, but
like, it's not a place you want to be. It's dangerous. Yeah. It's he thinks that if they haven't, I think the reason Justin agrees to go is because of the tape says, oh, I guess they didn't die because we escaped presumably right before they were going on their ascension. But the tape says, "Oh no, they're still alive." So
And that's
I
why
guess they didn't kill themselves. So I guess maybe it is safe to go back just so he can have some closure.
yeah, and this is why we know it's been 10 years, because the ascension happens every 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
But we don't know that yet, though.
We don't know that yet, but I mean, just in the context of the whole movie, we know it's 10 years.
Yeah.
Because we're building up to the ascension, which is going to happen towards the end of the film. They're a few days away.
I like the banner, like between the two of them on like the drive and stuff. To, I don't know, they really do come off as brothers. They're probably just really close friends because they make movies together. But they do the boobs thing for the like the silos that they see.
Do you know, that made me laugh because I'm pretty sure when I was younger I drove past something like that and I said the same thing. Yeah.
With boobs. Yeah, boobs.
Well, there's always two. If they don't want people to call them boobs, don't make two. Have three, have one.
Yeah, it made me laugh.
But yeah, so they get there and people seem very friendly, and we meet Hal and we meet Anna and everyone, and they all look very healthy, and Justin's like, "This is weird, you all look good," and he's like, "Yeah, fresh air, good food,
clean living, clean diet." I'm like, you guys do nothing but drink beer and like smoke marijuana and like can't be that clean.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I don't think it's clear to us when they first meet them. Obviously Justin's really kind of in shock about how good they look. It's not until they're in the little room on their own where he says, "This is weird. Like, these people are all like," because Aaron's like saying, "Oh, Anna's like, really nice," and like, he's saying something about Anna, and Justin's like, "Hey, she's like, 20 years older than you, right?" And he's like, "What? No way. She doesn't look that old." He's like, "Yeah, these people are all in their 40s because they were all like 30 when we left."
Yeah. And she makes a comment about like how she makes clothes for everybody. And she's like, "Remember when I used to make clothes for you when you were just a little guy?" Like, yeah, it's weird.
It is a little weird because there's clearly flirtations happening. Yes.
Definitely a lot of flirting.
Yes. But they're in a cult, so I mean, it's.
Hey, they're both adults. Go for it, girl.
So, yeah, and they join in the lunch and like campfire stories, and we see that Justin is very anti kind of like agreeing with that. There's various points where. Like at one point, like Aaron says to him something about the camp, and he says like, "Thanks for coming back here. This is good for me." And Justin says, "Oh well, I'm just glad you get to see how crazy it all is." And it's like, well, really, nothing so far has been that crazy. Like
everyone seems really happy.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're a bunch of hipster douchebags, but like so far there's been
God, they're so hipster. It's such a hipster cult. Of course they brew beer.
There's no death cult stuff yet, which is also how they're making money and how they can afford to like live. They export their beer. That's what they do. Yeah. And yeah, so. We have all these little bits. Justin's like determined not to like give in to it. Like there's this one guy who's in the cult who is doing magic tricks. He does like a card trick with him, and even though we see the card and he gets the right card after his trick, Justin says no, that's not the right one because he always wants them to think he's failed. So the guy's like, "Oh, I've got another trick." Then he does this thing where he throws a baseball into the air and it doesn't come back down. And he grabs Justin's hand. He's like, "No, come on," and he like sort of flips it over so it's like sort of. Open upwards, and then the ball lands in his hand, and Justin's like, quite rightly, like, "What the hell?
Yeah.
How could you do that? That's impossible."
Yeah, that was a good "what the hell" moment. But
have you got a drone up there that's like trained?
Is it ever possible to make a magician look cool?
Not in a movie, because here's the thing. Here's my problem with magicians in movies, right? Because I did you ever see that movie come out a few years ago called Now You See Me?
No.
Right, well, don't. It's
about magicians.
Yeah, it's super mediocre. Right, which, by the way, can I just one side little complaint here is that they made a sequel to that movie for some reason, but they didn't call it Now You Don't. They called it Now You See Me Too. You make a movie called Now You See Me, and you do a sequel. You call the sequel Now You Don't. You fools! You absolute fools! Anyway, so that movie is about all these magicians. It's got an impressive cast. It's got Mark Ruffalo, and it's got Lizzie Kaplan was in there, Woody Harrelson. You know, it's got this all-star cast of people, and they're magicians, and they're pulling off this big heist using their magic tricks and whatever, and they do all these things that are supposed to be impressive, and they use their magic tricks to trick people. And the problem with magic tricks in movies is that the reason why a magic trick is impressive is because a magician, even though you know it's a trick, will do it in front of you, and it's impressive that they're able to hide it and make it look like it is some sort of trick or an illusion, right? And make it look like it's impressive. It's not impressive in a movie because movie making inherently is a magic trick, because it's editing, it's visual effects, it's doing things that it's pointing the camera in the right direction, not to see the light rig that's off to the side. A movie, the whole point of a movie is to craft it, to give it a specific look, a feel, an appearance. It's a magic trick already. So doing a magic trick within a movie, it's like, well, it's not impressive because you're just editing around the fake part. Like, you're not hiding anything because you're just hiding it the way you hide everything else. So it's not impressive. Anyway.
So no.
Yeah, did that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
So no, it is not possible.
Yeah. So when Tara was watching this movie, I got a random message saying, "This tug of war better pay off." So why don't you explain the tug of war scene?
Okay, so they're all drinking beer around a campfire, and then the cult leader is really excited because it's time for tug of war against the sky.
Yeah, this is super surreal because
they call it the struggle.
Because there's like a rope that just goes into darkness. You don't see where it goes. It just kind of goes up. It's almost as if it's like at the top of a tree or something like that. But it just kind of
right.
Yeah.
So he takes a turn of grabbing the rope, pulling on it. Something's on the other side, but we can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
It lifts pretty high up in the sky, like maybe about 30 feet, maybe less, I'm not sure. And I guess he wins because the rope gives way.
We
don't see what's on the other side.
It takes 2 tries, though, because this is Aaron we're talking about. Aaron tries pulling it.
Well, this is the cult leader, and then Aaron does it.
Oh, sure, yeah. The cult leader does it first, and then Aaron does it. The first time he fails, and he says, "Can I do it again?" He's like, "Yeah, we never give up. Go for it." And he sort of like ties like a knot in a loop so that he can put it around his waist, and he does it that way.
Right. Because they told him before, like, "Oh, didn't you used to like to fish?" And he's like, "Yeah, but I don't think I remember how to even tie a fisherman's knot or something." But he makes a fisherman's knot in order to defeat whatever's on the other side of the rope. And it's supposed to be a metaphor for overcoming obstacles, I guess. They just call it the struggle.
It's a metaphor, but I think specifically in the case of Aaron, it's about this thing wanting them to like remember the things that he liked when he was here. It's about him becoming the cult version of Aaron again, I guess.
Well,
but
yeah. And plus, his brother does it next, and he immediately fails at it and gives up on it
and hurts himself.
Stupid. I hate this. And that's more like, well, yeah. So here's like his brother is always talking down to him and telling him he can't do stuff or not without his permission or whatever, like holding him back. And now all of a sudden they're in a place where Aaron is happy to be, is in a place now where he's a bit better than Justin, or at least good at something, and remembering the things that he used to like, because his life was shitty outside of the cult. And so it's very much he's getting recruited back in moment.
Justin does it. He gets his hand cut. The rope kind of slices his hand when it sort of pulls out. And there's this other girl at the camp named Lizzie, who we do see briefly before. We see her like do like a painting or something like that. Like she draws things, and she's the one who's sort of helping like sort of patch him up. She's got bandage or a band-aid or whatever, and she's seeing to him. And Hal's sort of standing over at the door, and this is kind of a weird scene. And there's a reason why I'm describing this so in depth is because Hal's over at the door, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, man, it's a metaphor. You're not supposed to get hurt. I'm really sorry that happened." And he's like, "That's whatever, And don't get me wrong, Justin, the way he interacts with these people is always very kind of awkward, and it's like he's always kind of judging them, even though he's trying to pretend to be nice. But he always thinks they're a bunch of nut jobs. And there's a weird thing where after Lizzie like puts the band-aid on, she kind of sort of sits there and stares at him, and Hal says something really weird, like, "Yeah, you two have fun," and he just stays there. He doesn't move. And Lizzie's just kind of looking at him with the doomy eyes, And Justin's just like, I'm getting tired. I'm going to go to bed. You guys have a good night. It just kind of like nopes out of there. But I sympathize.
Is this the same time that the other girl is hitting on Aaron?
It probably is. Yeah, it's probably when Anna's like saying, "Hey, do you want to come to my room and see my new designs for my?"
Oh yeah.
For the clothes that I
He's
make.
like, "You get paid to do these?" And she's like, "What? Being alone in a room with you?" Oh, just kidding. It was a nice piece of awkward writing, like, oh.
Yeah. Especially since I feel like that's a joke that the person who's uncomfortable makes, and she's the one who feels like she's not uncomfortable. She's the one who feels like she's in control.
Yeah. Well, I think they both admitted on the drive there that neither of them have been successful with girls at all. Like, neither of them have slept with a girl or had a girlfriend. And so they're all still pretty innocent when it comes to this stuff. They just have so much trauma from their past that they're working through, that girls have been, a difficult thing for them to move on.
There was a story how they picked up a couple of girls once at something, and for some reason Justin mentioned they used to be in a death cult, and of course the girls ran for the hills, because why wouldn't they? Pretty normal thing to do. But I should also mention at this point, we're still in this, at least I'm not, I didn't necessarily believe him, but like the two brothers at this point are still, well, I say the two, obviously Justin always knew he was kind of making it up, but like Aaron's still under the impression right now that they're all castrated. And I was kind of joking to myself that this is why the girls are so horny. It's because all the guys don't have dicks. So there's like two new guys are in the cams, like, oh, quick, pounce on them before they take it off.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I was also saying, wouldn't Aaron think to himself, it's kind of weird how horny everyone is when apparently, according to my brother, they're all getting their dicks cut off. Like, that doesn't seem like the sort of thing you do when you're horny.
Right. Right. Is castration the loss of the dong, which we agreed is 20% funnier than any other word for penis? But castration, isn't that just the testicles?
No, I thought it was a dick, especially because I mean the movie even later on, when Hal gets mad and he's talking about the reputation they've got because of what Justin said to the media, he says everyone thinks we're dickless. So even in the movie, they reference that it's referred to the dongs, it's dongless. He should have said, but he was angry. He wasn't going for humor, you see. So he didn't say dong. He said dickless. He wanted to be serious. He wanted to be taken seriously in the moment. And if he said dongless, he wouldn't be taken seriously. So yeah, he's back in. They wake up the next morning. There's like a couple of lines about oh yeah, Anna was showing me her stuff and yada yada. And again, they sound like 12-year-olds almost for a minute here when he's like, oh hey, did you like sleep together or something? And he's like, no. But there was a moment where she looked at me and I thought she might have like wanted to hold hands or something.
It's kind of sweet, yeah.
And I'm like, this is weird dialogue for someone who's like 26, but whatever.
Yeah.
So, I shouldn't have used the phrase sleeping together because there was actually a very specific conversation later about sleeping together, which was really sort of showed how innocent that Aaron was, because so later on, a second like night of drinking at the bonfire, like they ended up. In fact, it's actually later on. It's after Justin separated from him, and he's kind of stormed off, and he's there for a night without Aaron, and Justin actually sleeps in the same room as Anna. And when Justin and Aaron are reunited later, and I'm just saying this now because it's relevant, it doesn't really tie into the plot. He says, "Oh, we slept together," and like Aaron really awkwardly goes, "Oh, congratulations!" and then they keep talking.
"I've never done that before."
Yeah, and they keep talking for like a minute, and then eventually realizes, "Wait a minute, you had sex, right?" He's like, "No, I didn't say that." It's like, "You said you slept together." It's like, yeah, we slept together, we slept in the same bed together. It's like, this is where stuff starts getting a little bit weird. There's kind of like these things where they're hanging out and they're shooting guns out like at the range, and there's like a weird moment where like one of the bullets that Justin shoots kind of like doesn't like go all the way, and then he picks up on the ground. It's like it hits something, but there was nothing there. And then there's all little tidbits, and it's when he's out for a run later on that the first like proper like supernatural thing really happens, where there's like a flash of light and like a Polaroid kind of like lands next to
It
him.
was like the sun became a light bulb that was like suddenly turned off
Yeah.
or
Um,
like needed to be changed.
and the this Polaroid lands, and it's of like I can't remember what the photo was actually of, but it indicated that there was something in
A
the
buoy.
lake. It was the buoy, right? So there was something in the lake, right? And he shows this to Hal, you know, the kind of leader. I say kind of because he insists later on that there is no leader, but he comes across to us as the leader, and he's like, oh well, I mean, it's showing you something that it wants you to see, and maybe there's something there for you, and you know, obviously Justin's getting weirded out by this, and later on they're actually in the lake, they're fishing, which again, going back to, you know, Aaron likes fishing, and like maybe he's doing this for him. It's kind of a sweet thing, but he gets frustrated like halfway through and like takes off his shirt and his pants, and he's like, "I'm diving in," and he dives in. This is where we get this big aerial
Well, he
shot.
dives in because he sees the buoy from the picture.
Yeah. But this is where we get the aerial shot that you mentioned earlier, where you can kind of almost see the shape of something in the water as he's diving
It's like
down.
an ink blot.
Yeah, it's almost like a big butterfly
Yeah.
in the water. But he goes in and he comes out with a lockbox, and in the lockbox is a tape, another video cassette, and you know, everyone's kind of like cheering about this, and they're like, "Oh, this is great! Let's watch it together." And they're in the mess hall, and they put this tape on, and like it's footage of them like kind of promoting the cult, you know, and handing out leaflets and saying what the cult's about, and their white shirts from years ago, and it's them saying they're devoted and like how much the cult means to them, and then it like just kind of freezes at the end of that, and it's this really awkward moment because these are the two that betrayed them, these are the two that ran away. And it becomes this really awkward moment where he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Those aren't supposed to be embarrassing, but for some reason, it wanted to show you that. It wanted to remind you of this." And this is what leads to the big fight halfway throughout the movie, where Aaron and Justin storms out, Aaron runs out after him, Hal goes out after him, and this is where, even though Hal keeps trying to be nice and keeps trying to say you're welcome here, and there's a place for both of you here, Justin can't let things lie. This is where it comes out that he lied and made up this stuff about castration and just to kind of assume death. He basically just made it more demonic sounding so that Aaron would run away with him and that he would rescue him and take him away. And
I think he really did believe that the ascension meant death.
yeah, and kind of a way it does, but obviously we'll get to exactly what it means later. But this is where Hal actually loses his temper and gets really emotional and says, you know, you like, you know, betrayed us, but you also kind of ruined everything. Like you like whenever we like try and do business, you know, our livelihood is selling this beer that we make, and that's how we like survive. And
Yeah.
almost anyone now, when they like we try and like get a new client who to buy our beer, they can Google us and very quickly see an article about how we're a bunch of dickless death cult worshippers, and
Yeah.
how that
I think
affects
he
our
said
image.
like Heaven's Gate knockoff or something.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you sympathize with them a little bit. We're like, yeah, you kind of like just threw them all under a bus based on some assumptions when, like, did you have any real reason to say this? You kind of, you know, jumped this.
It's true. I wasn't expecting to have any kind of empathy for this character, but it works well in the scene.
Yeah. So Justin goes to the car and it doesn't start because it's established earlier on. The reason why they need a new battery is because Aaron has a habit of leaving. What was it left on?
Some lights.
Yeah, some of the lights. So the car won't start, and he has to like storm off. And this is where the movie gets into the proper sci-fi stuff, because he runs into the shitty Carl character in his cabin. And when the guy opens the door, there's another version of himself hanging there, you know, via noose. And
He remembers Carl too from his time in the cult.
yes, and shitty Carl, as I understand it, is referenced in the first movie, but you know, you don't see him in the first movie, but he's referenced in it. And it becomes clear that he, you know, he's living in some kind of a loop. You know, this is kind of the first real big thing that we see. I mean, there are some other weird things. Like, there's a moment, I think this night or maybe the night before, where Anna takes Aaron out to like this weird edge of what later on it becomes clear there's like bubbles in this area. The camp maybe being the biggest one, but she takes him to the wall of this bubble, and you kind of see this weird reflection sort of going down the side of this bubble.
He asks if you can go through it, and she doesn't really answer.
Yeah, and You kind of can, but there's rules and there's like a weirdness to it. It sounds like maybe they can, but Aaron and Justin still can.
Yeah, I think people
Not
I think
trapped.
people we meet are trapped in there.
Yes.
We find out why.
Yeah. Because this is where we get to the mythology of it, which I guess I'll kind of explain now and then go through each of the meetings we have with various people. But
yeah, Shitty Carl explains it, so we're already there.
Yeah. So basically, this area, maybe because there was a UFO that landed or because an alien landed here, it's kind of vague as to what the reason is, but something in this area, this piece of land, has created a series of time bubbles where time loops. And the biggest one's the camp, which does loop every 10 years. So it's a really long loop. They stay there for 10 years, the ascension happens, and that's why they're all still the same age, is because it kind of loops back. And they remember everything. Like, it's not like they're forgetting stuff that was in the previous loop, but they essentially go back in time 10 years and start the loop over again. And it is what it is. And the people in the other loops seem to want to kill themselves before the loop ends because they don't want to go through the ascension process, whereas the people in the camp see it as like an honor, and they kind of like, go in a circle and prepare for it and
yeah, they
welcome
really
it.
do worship it.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of like an eternal life.
Yeah, and then everyone else
10
doesn't.
years is a good loop, especially when you're their age.
Yeah. 10 years is a good loop if you're going to be there sort of from, I don't know, I mean, they're ending at about maybe their early 30s, so they're going from their early 20s to their early 30s. I mean, that's a decent enough place to loop. I'm still in that category.
Yep.
We have all these bubbles of time, but they all have different loops, right? So we run into places where Shitty Carl's is 3 hours, we find out. There's one really specific one in a tent, and it's someone from like World War One or something like that. I don't know, it's like an old soldier in this little combat tent, and the loop is literally like 10, maybe even less than 10 seconds.
It's like 3 seconds, yeah.
He's he gets up, he runs for the door, he's trying to escape, and he just keeps like snapping back to the chair. Over and over again, and there's like a clock outside the little tent, showing the clock. It keeps going back. Just every time it goes, do. It just keeps doing it.
There's like some kind of musical note that keeps going up. Is stuck on a loop also.
Oh yeah, he's got like a record player in there that's like cycling back every time as well. Yeah,
and he has the same motion where he's always like getting up from the chair and running. And I guess presumably he's been stuck in this 3-second loop for like a century.
Yeah, because he keeps looking. Because when one of our characters is outside the little like window in the tent, he does look at them. He sort of acknowledges their existence. He can see people.
He looks like he's in pain.
Yeah, he's probably miserable. He's been running to this endless story. He's like, I guess this idea that this character's stuck in an endless war or something. I don't know. Like maybe I'm jumping something there, but we meet other characters. Of course, we'll get to Mike and Chris, of course, and the tease for them, of course, earlier on with the blonde woman, the wife. We'll talk about her, but like we get all this thing, and we get this sense that anyone who's stuck in the loop, and my understanding of it is that once you go through the process of going through the end of the loop, you're stuck there forever. And you can never leave it.
My understanding was too, because they kept trying to get the kids to escape. Wasn't it Shitty Carl who admitted like he was the one who said, "I told you to leave. Why'd you come back?" Like, because you don't want to be here during the ascension. And I guess the sign of the ascension is when there's 3 moons in the sky. We see there's 2.
Yeah.
And about to be a 3rd.
Yeah. So. All this stuff was really interesting mythology-wise. I mean, like I say, it's a kind of a weird shift in the movie where before it was like really kind of vague and ambiguous, and then all of a sudden we've got all these weird time loop bubbles. But I think I liked it kind of unveiling this. I liked the shot eventually where you see like all the bubbles where the camera sort of pans out and you see like all these bubbles just kind of glistening in the light, and that looked pretty good. And we have this weird thing where like navigation's very wonky. Carl gives Justin like a compass, and he's like, don't trust what you see, only trust the compass. And he draws him a little map to get to this other bubble. And there's an interesting question there is how he knows how to get to the other bubble when he can't leave his bubble. Like there's a bit of interest there. I'm not going to say it's a mistake or a plot hole, but I'm just curious as to how. But he wants a gun, and he says, "Go to Mike or go to Chris. Chris will give me a gun. So if you bring me back a gun, I will tell you how to get back to camp so you can find your brother." And there's a lot of really weird moments here. He's very shitty, as the name implies, and angry. But he also like gets really emotional at the end, and he sits on a bike and just cries for like the end of the scene.
Is Justin not in Shitty Carl's bubble when this loop repeats? Like, is that a plot hole?
No, I don't think he is.
Okay.
Well, it depends. Like, because where is he? Because he finds the body in the thing, but like I don't. Maybe.
I don't know. Because in the next tent, the cabin that he goes to with the other two guys, he also watches them go through their version of the ascension. Maybe it's because they killed themselves instead of, because Shitty Carl kills himself and then he gets on his cycle starts over. Maybe that's the difference.
Yeah, it's not the actual ascension that's happening for them. They're just killing themselves before they get to it. But yeah, maybe the ascension doesn't even happen in their bubbles because they're killing themselves before it happens. You know.
So that's the way they escape. Because when they go to the other cabin, they also end up killing themselves instead of waiting for the ascension, or their version of the ascension, whatever it is.
Yeah, well, yeah, like they're reset. Like they're killing themselves before it happens, presumably because it's less painful. As much as hard as that is to believe.
Yeah, well, maybe that's like our headcanon way of saying that's how Justin's able to get out or not be stuck in their loop now that he's in there.
Maybe you have to. I don't know.
Maybe it's a ritual. I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. The entity that's doing this to everything, right? The entity that's controlling all this stuff, is clearly luring them in and giving them photos. Because, obviously, both Aaron and Justin get photos and like clues and hints of where to go and how to stay and all that, right? Maybe that kind of claims people for the loops. Maybe it's not just a case of being there, but it actually wants them to be in the main loop at the cabins, at the camp. Maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe it's just like, no, it's claimed them for that one, so they can't get stuck in the other ones because they don't belong to those loops.
Maybe it's all in control by the one entity, and it makes up all the rules.
Because there is a level of sentience, of guidance happening from this thing. It is directing them in places. So. And there is like weird monoliths that are scattered around, and I like that kind of stuff. This idea that previous people who have worshipped it have built these monoliths of like this, this skull head and this dragon that's some, like there's all these various like things they find, and I like the idea of this mythology of them navigating between the bubbles and like that time and like distance and navigation don't quite work the way they're supposed to. I kind of liked almost like a science fiction version of Blair Witch. Like instead of like witchcraft stuff, it's like this weird sci-fi anomaly stuff.
Yeah, I don't love the idea of an alien being on Earth just to like mess with people.
Well,
for its own entertainment. I find that kind of lazy.
Yeah, but we don't really know that's what it is, though. I mean, that's just them assuming it. Like they're just theorizing, and we're just kind of taking it because we don't have anything else to go on.
Yeah, maybe.
Like at the very least,
maybe it's something else.
The only thing
I don't know. Like that works in like a horror movie with a demon or whatever, or a ghost that's trying to, make somebody scared. But an alien just to. I don't know, just to observe.
Tara, the only thing we actually know about anything here is that different people have worshipped whatever this thing is and have applied their own beliefs to it. They don't know anything. They know there's something. There's obviously some kind of entity. Is it some paranormal thing? Is it an alien? Is it like, I don't know, is it God? Is it God's shitty son having a bit of a laugh with like this area? Like we don't really
Jesus.
We don't have a whole lot to go on. Like it's intentionally very vague, and I'm actually okay with that. I actually kind of think it works better with the mystery element as opposed to like giving it some sort of clear answer.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I just assumed it was alien because we were watching a science fiction film. But maybe it is. Maybe it is something else.
But maybe I mean, I guess the only
Maybe
thing
it's a side effect of their version of their engine for, I don't know, space travel. Creates these time bubbles or whatever.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that how do you know it's doing it for amusement? Like maybe.
Well, because the character brings it up. I don't remember which one. Probably Shitty Carl.
Okay,
maybe I just like saying the name Shitty Carl.
But again, like that's him theorizing. He doesn't know. He's just he's reading it that way. Where like it could be something that. Like maybe like I think maybe even suggest that maybe it needs to feed on people, and to do that it needs to have them trapped like this. So maybe it's like more of a necessity rather than like, oh, I want to mess with people. It may be the reason why it wants to lure in.
It does seem like it's messing with people though, with the photographs and the videos.
Well, yeah, but this is all a thing to lure them in though. Maybe the reason why it wants to lure these people in is because maybe there's specific people who have more of whatever it wants. You know.
And why try to scare them?
With what? What does it try to scare them with?
When like Justin is doing his little run or whatever, and like the trailer like bobs up and down, you're like, which was a really cool scene, and then you can see in the background a tree falls.
Yeah,
like he's getting spooked.
I don't know, to show its power, to show its.
And he dives into the water, and he gets scared by what he sees down there.
To show him that he's its boss and that he should work, fear it, so that because what is a god if not something that many people fear, and they do everything out of fear because they think that they'll not get into heaven at the end. The vengeful god, like that's a thing.
Maybe this will work. I don't know. Yeah.
I think it's intentionally very vague, obviously, but like I don't. And I'm not saying it works perfectly, and I'm not saying that like I don't think there's a better movie to be made out of some of this mythology, but I do think that the core like science fiction mythology of the time bubbles and the weird like getting to and from between them is actually very interesting, and I kind of like those ideas. I don't know if it necessarily makes a compelling movie as a whole the way it is, but the ideas of what's happening in all these weird time bubbles I actually really like.
Yeah.
So. And eventually, like, Aaron makes the choice to try and go and find his brother because he gets a photograph as well of the trailer that he's eventually going to meet him at. So he goes searching, and the idea being that if he gets back with his brother, Hal's like, "Hey, if you get back, then it's time." And we get the sense that everyone at the cult, even though they do worship this thing, they're all kind of nervous now. Like, there's kind of a weird somber tone, like right before the ascension, presumably because it does hurt or because it is a very scary experience. Whatever it is, but Aaron goes searching, and it's during this time that Justin ends up at the house with Mike and Chris, and at this point we should go back and mention the blonde woman who was at the camp, who didn't seem like she was part of the camp. She was kind of miserable and was complaining about the noise and left notes everywhere, and Aaron, or Justin, sorry, does kind of try and hit on her. Well, he says he's not. I kind of believe him. I almost get the sense that he's just trying to talk to someone who, like, isn't one of these weird hippies.
Right, like he was excited to meet somebody there who wasn't part of the cult.
Yeah, and he cracks a weird joke. He's like, "Oh, I'm not hitting on you. I'm just, like you seem like a decent person, unlike everyone else here." But we find out that she's looking for a husband who's been missing, but she's not even sure how long she's been here. And it does beg the question, has she been here since before the loop? Probably not, because it's been a 10-year loop, so she's probably only been here since, sometime within this 10 years.
Yeah, I guess we don't know. We don't know, because her husband is in a loop and he's in a much shorter loop, and I don't know. I guess it could have been. It could be longer than the 10 years.
I don't get the impression she knows what's going to happen with the
But
loop.
she seems to be trapped.
Is she
also
trapped? I guess she's trapped. Yeah, I guess you're right. But I was kind of thinking, like, the way she talks to Aaron about, or talks to Justin about everything. I keep mixing their names up. God damn it! Do you know what it is? It's because Aaron's name's first in the credits, and I feel like Justin should be first. But that's
because Justin's more the lead, I guess.
Yeah. But Justin like talks to her. The way she talks back to him, she never really like. You feel like she'd warn him, or she would say something like, hey, like, like, I get why all the people in the cult are being kind of like vague about it, because they want it to be like this thing that you accept and like come willingly to. But I feel like she would be more inclined to just be like, hey, this place is crazy and you'll be trapped here, so go. As it turns out, Shitty Carl's the only one that kind of tries to warn anyone, but whatever. Whatever. So he ends up at the house, and we find out that this Mike character is actually the husband that she's been looking for, and he is in a week-long loop. They mentioned that they're in a 7-day loop, and this is actually the two main characters from the other film.
Oh, okay.
From Resolution. The whole movie's about them, and about them. They're in the house. He's trying to get Chris clean because he's a junkie. Which, by the way, I actually really liked the actor playing Chris. I thought he had a very interesting demeanor for a guy who's like chained to like a pipe, trying to like get off crack. I loved how when Justin comes in the room, the house is like, hey, I'm looking for whatever. He's like, hey, before we get into that, do you have any crack on you? And it's very casual. He doesn't even
straightforward.
He doesn't even sound that desperate. He sounds like it's a really casual question. It's almost like saying, do you have any gum on you? He's like, you got any crack on you? Like, on me? No. Like, well, anything else? Any other drugs? Oh, no, not really done. So what are you here for? Like, it's very... It's like he's not even mad at him when he says no. He's like, okay, whatever. But yeah, this is apparently what the movie's about. The first movie. It's about these two characters, and there's like a presence outside the house that they're scared of that attacks them, which I assume is the entity of this place, or at the very least,
so is the whole movie about this week-long
presumably
thing? He's chained up. I think it's like a detox, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like the first loop where they're not trapped yet, or if they're trapped and like this is like an earlier loop, but obviously before this one.
Man, what a week to have repeated, the week where you're detoxing from crack.
I know. And we see the loop start again. We see him kind of like, because they give Justin what he's there for, and he says goodbye, and he kind of understands things a little bit better, and he says something that lets us know that he's the husband of the woman that we've been seeing, and we see him like set himself on fire as well as Chris, like sets the whole house on fire, and then we see the loop reset, and he's like sort of like coming up to the house, and Chris has got a gun and he's on the porch and he's shooting, and it's almost like this like thing where he almost shoots Mike, not realizing who he is, which I assume is in the other movie. I assume that's something that's in the other movie. That's maybe how it starts, or is near the start. But intriguing. I actually almost kind of wish we watched the other movie first, just because
this would probably pay off a lot more.
It would pay off a lot more, but I kind of like the idea of it like being so narrow, and then you watch this movie and the mythology expands because it introduces all this other stuff. But it is sci-fi though, so we'll do it at some point. I
mean, I don't think we knew that it was a sequel.
No, and again, it's not really a sequel. It's more like a in the same world kind of
companion piece.
But yeah. Apparently, their cameo in the first movie, they come to them and like give them leaflets about the cult and say, "Hey."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of neat. There's a neat little connection. I think in the interview I read about it when we were talking about it, they said they've got the cheapest shared universe in movie history. Is that
that's funny?
So the cheapest cinematic universe. That's kind of funny. Marvel's billions and billions of dollars. We did a movie for $20,000 and then whatever this one cost.
Now they got Anthony Mackie. Maybe it's the same universe there too.
Yeah, maybe it'll tie into Marvel. This is actually like the next villain.
That'd be funny.
The next Avengers villain is going to be this entity that's doing all this shit.
I just think it's funny if Anthony Mackie is in both the most expensive and the cheapest.
So Aaron goes looking for Justin, and there's a great moment where he leaves the bubble, and we see that they actually can't see each other now because he's on the outside of the bubble now, and Anna's on the inside, and they can't see each other. So there's this great shot where we can see both of them. We get shots from both of their perspectives where you can't see the other one, but we get a nice shot where we see both of them on either side of the bubble. But they clearly can't see each other. It's a nice visual touch. I think, we're actually kind of talking about a lot of good scenes or a lot of good ideas in this, and it doesn't sound like it really describes the movie we were saying earlier on. It's a bit just okay overall, but it's because
but it is like there's still there's a lot to like in the film, and I think maybe if it was just a bit tighter and
Tighter script. That's all it needs.
yeah, it would have been better. And maybe I mean, not all the acting was bad, but some of the acting was okay.
Mm.
But you know, I am excited to see what their next project is.
Yeah. I'd recommend checking out Spring because I did kind of like that. You can definitely tell it's from the same people. It's got a similar kind of like ethereal tone on top of like a weird twist on a supernatural thing.
Yeah.
So, and I love a good ethereal tone. But I will say I do think like because when I read the interview about this or one of the reviews I read after I watched it I wanted to know about the other movie and how it connected, and when I searched for it, it was like this interview with the directors, and the opening mentioned it succeeds where another Earth failed, and I was like, no, I like that movie. So I think that type of ethereal
I haven't seen it.
works better for me. But Brett Marling's definitely an acquired taste, though. She's very love or hate in terms of her writing. But so Justin goes looking for Aaron, or Aaron goes looking for Justin rather, and they end up meeting at this camper, this RV, and they kind of reunite, and this is where we have the whole sleeping together joke soon after and whatnot. But there's this really great moment where when they leave this camper, the camera sort of like pans over after they've left to this projector that starts projecting the same shot we started on, and then inside the shot that we started on the projection, it pans over and sees a projector, and it's this endless thing. So it's a nice visual representation of the whole movie.
Yeah, and this is the part I think where when they meet up again, where Aaron has the line of like, what difference does it make if we are in a loop here versus in a loop outside of here? At least here we know we'd be happy, and outside we know we have to struggle and our lives are terrible. And it does kind of remind me of like, yeah, I guess my job, or not my job, but my previous job, I kind of had that mentality of feel like I'm stuck in a loop, but I'm stuck in a shitty loop. A job that I don't enjoy. And it makes a good point. And it's a point about, and so does, Justin saying like, but what are you sacrificing? Like, yeah, your life might suck, but it might be great. You might be missing out on a lot more.
Yeah, and the messaging at this point.
What's the cost of immortality here?
Yeah, forgetting the immortality because that's like supernatural, but the messaging here is, I think it's a pretty clear kind of sentiment that it's trying to get across to people is that, you can retreat to the safe loop, the safe place where you're kind of trapped by it's almost like back to like, we were talking about this in Watchmen recently about nostalgia being toxic, but and it's not quite that. But like this idea of like accepting this safe loop means locking yourself off from the possibility of anything, much like Tower's cat just is locking itself from the possibility of happy, painless days. And it's harder in the real world, and it is. And I think it ties into these characters who had these really weird childhoods where they didn't necessarily learn to interact with the world properly.
Right.
And I think it goes into the idea that because they've not really made peace with each other, they can't really move on in the real world outside of each other. They have to kind of come to terms with each other first before they can have rich, full lives with everyone else and with everything else in the real world. And that's what the movie is ultimately about. When they get back to the camp, and we cut back occasionally and we see the rest of the camp kind of go out and form a circle. They have like a last supper. The big bearded guy unlocks this. There's a little hut that we've been seeing the whole movie that's got this big padlock on it, and he unlocks that before he goes off with the others, and they all go and form a circle around the campfire, and they all disappear. Their clothes are left behind. It's this thing in the sky is taking them all away, and we're left with just the two brothers, and they go into this cabin, and there's footage, just countless film reels and VHS tapes and Betamax of all these things, and it's all this footage of them since they've been here. It shows them the magic trick with the baseball, but from the perspective of the sky, where clearly this entity holds it up in the sky and then drops it eventually, and other moments that we saw throughout the film. And Aaron still wants to stay, and they go to the campfire where everyone disappeared, and they're sort of debating it, and then Justin sits down and says, all right, fine, if you're staying, I'd feel too guilty if I left without you, so I'm going to stay too, because I can't leave you alone, because we're brothers. And Aaron's like, wait, you're respecting my decision to stay here? He's like, I mean, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I guess, yeah, kinda. And he's like, okay, we can go then. He's like, wait, what? He's like, well, all I really wanted was for you to like actually treat me like an equal and like, respect my decisions and like, and of course, as they're saying this, the entire like bubble or the entire area, even all the bubbles start to like almost digitally corrupt and like there's like this vortex in the middle, and they have to run. So they're actually racing against the clock, and they're pushing the car so they can get it running and leave the big bubble that all these little bubbles are in. So it's this race against time, and they drive, and it does this. I actually thought it was going to cut to the credits because they're kind of like arguing, and Aaron insists that he drives, and just like, fine, you can drive, and they switch sides, and they're pushing the car and they're jumping in, and it sort of hits the edge of the bubble, and it's almost like it's going to be a car crash, but it cuts to black before we see it, so we don't actually. And I thought it was going to be ambiguous and cut to credits.
I thought it was too. Yeah.
Instead, though, we do see that they're okay afterwards. Although I read like in the article, one of the questions they asked them is that apparently there's like a fan theory online that them like going through the bubble is the car that hit their parents or caused the crash that killed their parents when they were kids. And the director says, nah, I never really thought of that, but it's a good theory.
That's funny.
But hey, okay, it's a nice idea. All right, whatever.
I guess they would have to time travel inside the loop first.
I
which
guess
would mean they would be stuck in the bubble, though.
I guess that the whole bubbles looping or so, I don't know. I mean, again, it's not what they actually intended, so it doesn't work. But
yeah,
you can see why people maybe thought of it and went, "Hey, that's a cool idea. Maybe that'd be something."
Yeah, it's cutesy.
But there is one scene where we see all the people are back at the camp and they're all happy and they're back and all healthy. And the brothers ride off, and that's the movie basically.
Yep.
So, they overcome it, and the movie's about their relationship. It's about them, and it's kind of hopeful. It's a hopeful ending where they do actually overcome their past, because that's the thing, they're literally running from their past to escape into the future, and it's almost like their entire life they have been defined by the fact that they were in this cult. They were defined that they were raised there and that they can't escape it.
I mean, Aaron definitely gets his closure that he was in desperate need of, because he didn't really choose to leave. He just followed his brother. But now he gets to choose to leave.
But even Justin, because of the way their relationship was with each other, that they both had to go through this. They both had to leave their past behind, and they couldn't do that until they both understood it and accepted what it was and moved on.
Do you think there's any significance to like the old videotapes that they use, or the style that they used for communicating? Like the entity, whatever it is, chooses to communicate through old technology, or is it just that was the technology that was brought in?
If I was to hazard a guess, I would say that the reason why there's a variety of it is because we don't see any discs, so maybe there's like nothing new.
Well, yeah, and even Aaron's like cell phone is an old flip phone, so this might not be 2019.
Or 2017, you mean?
2017, okay. Yeah. This might be 10 years ago.
True, but I think if I was to hazard a guess, I'd say the reason why there's such a variety is because as more people come to the loops and get stuck in them, there's like a more variety of technology that's left there. Now, why does the entity like use these specifically? Because it's cooler. It feels weirder and more mysterious. Is my answer.
Maybe it's just very hipster.
It's very hipster. Yes, they're all into the VHS and Betamax.
We don't use digital here.
Yes, but I think the whole theme of like recording things and showing it to people, again, it ties into the idea of it's all been about their past and like obsessing over the past and the memories. And like, I think, I said earlier on that nostalgia is toxic, and I think there's an element of that in there, but I don't think it's necessarily always nostalgia in this case. It's also just being trapped by your own, your darker memories, your tragic past, and not being able to escape that. And so the movie's about them escaping, and to escape it, they have to see eye to eye. They have to actually, be equals to each other. And not only does Aaron have to learn all the lies he was told, but Justin has to also learn the mistakes that he made and the lies that he said, even though it did technically save him and his brother, because they'd be trapped in the loop if he didn't. But, that's the end of the movie. And I think it's a solid effort. I think it's got a lot of great ideas in it. As much as it does need a bit of tightening, and it is a little bit stretched out in places. It's pretty solid.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I think it's worth checking out. I think it is a bit slow, and I think it is just a bit too long. It's got a lot of ideas. Not all of them I think are executed very well, but um,
There's two different movies. Like, I feel like there's a good movie here about two brothers like dealing with their past, and then there's a good movie about the sci-fi bubbles and like all that stuff. Like I think there's two good movies that are kind of smashed together.
yeah, I think the cult stuff doesn't go quite far enough.
Mm.
I want it to be more culty, unless we, all wear flannel and drink beer and,
Yeah, actually, there was one
know.
thing we didn't really mention is that there's a running theme throughout the movie that different members of the cult kind of try to explain it in different ways. Like they try to Hal has like a mathematical formula that he thinks explains what this thing is, and he's not quite figured it out yet. So he sees it as like a science problem, and then someone else like is drawing these like pictures of a demon, and they sort of interpret it that way. So they kind of set up this idea, and it kind of goes along with the different monoliths that they find as they're wandering through the various timelines, I'll call them. Is that over the years different people have interpreted it as different things, and maybe that ties into just the idea of religion itself, is the idea that people don't know what to think of something, so they
Right, yeah.
apply
And try to
an image to it.
translate what they don't understand
Yeah,
as to, like, this is clearly what it means. There's a really great Rick and Morty episode about it. I'm sure everybody listening has seen it.
sure. Because even Mike and Chris, like, he finds hard drives, and they're like, "Oh, this will be the answer. We'll find something on here."
Yeah, but it's just more questions, and then their leader, or whatever you want to call him, says, "I think it's trying to say that you guys are forgiven. Like it's about forgiveness." But he's still trying to translate something he doesn't really know the answer to.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like there's two good movies in here that don't quite mesh together, and like you say, it's a bit too long. It's a bit slow in places. Needs a bit of tightening. But I think if nothing else, you could admire the
Valiant
workmanship. You could admire the effort that went into it. You could admire the 2-man job it essentially was for the most part. And
Yeah, I'm glad people are giving these guys a movie. Like make something with a budget. Here you go. Let's see what you can do. And I agree. Give these guys a chance to work with Anthony Mackie. Let's see what they can do. Are you done, Kitty? You giving up?
Tara, what was your aha moment?
Oh, it was the brother talking about how his life was in a loop.
Okay. Yes.
Real life is a loop anyway.
Yeah.
That was my aha moment.
Yes. We're all in loops. We just get to hopefully pick a better loop. Yes. Make our loop better. Yes. Good advice for all. I guess we're at the point of the show where we're going to rate the movie. So Tara, what are you rating The Endless? And
yeah,
actually,
I know he thought I wasn't
fact,
very hot on the movie, and I think I've
I want to actually, Tara,
score.
before you finish this thought, I want to congratulate you. Because you've said multiple times throughout this review that you thought it was a bit slow and a bit boring in places, and at no point did you crack a pun about it feeling endless. So I want to congratulate you for that.
I'm just gonna rate the movie and ignore what you just said.
Yes.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I think my score has increased just from talking about it, because there is a lot of great ideas in here, and I think it is, for what it is, I think it's pretty well done. I think they did the best they could have done, and within the constraints that they had for filmmaking. And I admire the effort, and admire the movie, and I am looking forward to the next movie that they do. But it's still not the easiest movie to watch all the way through in one sitting. And there is something about it that doesn't quite work. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a 6. I think it's a sixer.
Okay, I think that's fair. I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to go with a 7. I think it's worth watching. I think it has a lot of interesting ideas, and if nothing else, I think you have to appreciate the ambition of everything that's going on here, and knowing how to make it work as well as they can on the budget they have. I think just having a tighter script is all they really need. And like, you know, this was a far more interesting watch for me than the vast majority of the mainstream stuff I've seen in the theaters this year. You know, like I this is far more interesting to me than, I don't know, what movie will I pick on? What did I see this year that I'll throw under the bus?
Terminator?
Sure, yeah. I mean, Terminator Dark Fate. This is a more interesting film that has more to say than Terminator Dark Fate. And it's born out of ideas rather than out of, you know, we want to make a sequel and get a franchise going again.
That's true. It is something new, and I do appreciate new.
Yeah. Or even just looking at, you know, like, I don't want to necessarily throw out the Marvel movies from this year under the bus, but like, you know, there's definitely a lot of Marvel movies that are less interested in this movie, or even like go to DC. Aquaman. Like, this was a better movie and far more interesting movie than Aquaman was.
Yeah, there's no way Aquaman is close to a 6 on my scale.
I can't remember.
Talk about a slog to get through. Ugh.
I may have given that a 6 at the time when I reviewed it, but I definitely have went down by now.
I don't like that movie at all.
It was a generous 6 because it wasn't terrible. Because it wasn't Batman v Superman, but I mean...
Yeah, that'll do that sometimes.
Yeah. Batman v Superman really like curved the scale for the next couple of years when it came to DC movies. I think even Justice League, I was like, oh, like a 5.5 maybe.
Hey, I didn't hate Justice League.
Yeah, it's a mess, but it's you can at least see the attempt to try and fix it. You know.
Are you gonna watch the Snyder Cut?
If it ever happens, I will watch it just to tear it apart, just so that I can make all the Snyder Cut people sad. See, you asked for it and it's garbage. It's even worse. But yes, 7 out of 10 for me. Endless is an interesting little film, and I appreciate it for what it is. Even if it's not necessarily the best execution of it, or even if it's not like great. But I do love it when they do hit that in the mark, when you get a nice little indie gem that just blows me away. And I have one on the schedule that we'll do in January that I love. And
you already know that it's good?
Yeah, and I added it because I want you to see it. I want you to watch it. So, now admittedly, we're going to do our top 25 sci-fi movies of the decade before we get to it, which is a shame, so you won't be able to have it on your list, but assuming it would make it, because I mean, you may not, maybe you'll feel differently. But
what movie is it?
I'm not going to tell you. I'll let you be a surprise. I'll tell you off air, but I don't want the audience to know what I'm talking about. Because, like I said, we're going to do our top 25 sci-fi of the decade, and we're doing that at the end of December. And I don't want to spoil what's going to be on my list at this juncture. Okay. But that's what we're doing. We're both going to make our own top 25 lists of the decade, and we're going to reveal them. So that'll be fun.
I guess I have homework.
You do have homework. So yeah, but that is us. That has been episode, I think it's like 38 of the Atomic Cinema Experiment. So thank you very much for joining us. You can, of course, let us know what you think of The Endless in the comments below on YouTube. You can like and subscribe. Ding the bell. That helps us out a lot. It helps you get notifications. So you can do that. All of that interaction does help us a lot, as does rating the audio podcast on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars. Yes, Tara?
What's coming up next week?
What's coming up next week? That's a good question. I can tell you, I remember it. It's another time travel movie. We're going back to time. And actually, you know what? Endless kind of has a little bit of time travel in it.
A little bit.
A little bit. The looping is kind of time travel in a weird way. But because you asked me a couple of weeks ago, does Edge of Tomorrow count? Should we do that for the time travel? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I count it. I mean, I guess Aliens, I guess.
Groundhog Day style doesn't count, so I guess Endless doesn't count.
Yeah, but Edge of Tomorrow is definitely sci-fi. There's no doubt debating that. But
we'll definitely do it.
But is it time travel sci-fi?
I don't know. Maybe if people listening want to answer.
Yeah, I think my logic.
Let us know.
I think my logic is what you just said there. My logic is if I wouldn't call Groundhog Day sci-fi, then I can't say that Edge of Tomorrow is time travel. Because if Groundhog Day was time travel, then it would be sci-fi.
Yeah.
So that's my logic. Anyway, so yes, coming up next time, another time travel movie. We're doing Predestination, which is an Ethan Hawke movie from, I think it's 2014. I have seen it before. I am curious. Do you know what?
Oh, is this the one going to be on your list?
No. Oh, I mean, it may be. It's not what I was
Maybe.
talking about before, but it may. Maybe we'll see. We'll see what I feel about it next week. But I will say this: I am looking forward to asking Tara next week what her aha moment is. Because it's definitely different for everyone who watches this movie when they realize something, and I'm looking forward to finding out your aha moment.
Well, that's exciting.
So yeah, so Predestination is next week. Obviously, you can support us by rating the podcast, Apple Podcast, give us 5 stars. More people will find us that way. And of course, we mentioned Patreon earlier. Patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support us financially. Every dollar matters and helps us keep creating content. So, and we are low budget. We're even lower budget than these guys. So go and go and support us. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. You can check out other content we have and that we create. Me and Tara do Twilight Zone reviews every week. So if you like us talk about sci-fi movies, maybe you like us talking about Twilight Zone every week. So you can check out that. Tara, why don't you promote something else that we do that you're not on?
You can watch the comics from the multiverse. I've never watched it, but I hear it's good.
Yes, we review DC Comics every week. So, yes. So,
keeps showing up in my feed, so somebody must be watching it.
Do you know, it's funny, like, I feel like if someone hears my thoughts on the DC movies, like, and they don't know I do a DC Comics podcast, they must assume, oh, he's such a Marvel guy. Oh, he's a Marvel fanboy. He just hates DC. I'm like, no, I literally have a DC Comics podcast that I host. Like, I love DC. I hate those movies because I love DC, because I love those characters, and because they bastardize them. Anyway.
The same reason I hate the newest version of Les Mis that was in theaters. Like, I love that stuff. I hate this. This movie is terrible. It's a garbage movie.
There you go.
Doesn't deserve the praise that it gets.
Yes, but did that have a jar of piss in it?
I only saw it once, but I don't think so.
Oh dear. All right, so yeah, that is us then. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching sci-fi movies, guys. And computer, that's Elsa.
Yum yum.